All right, welcome back. We are INFR3335U, social and multiplayer game design in the fall 2021 semester. And we are week 3, part 1 of our broadcasts on YouTube and online. And we're going to be talking about game monetization, industry terms, and mobile design in general. And let's talk about that right now. Let's start off. So first, let's look at our schedule. We're sitting at week 3. So we're here we are right now. We are also talking about a case study about Magic the Gathering. We'll talk about a little bit about that. And then some stuff that's due and so on is here from an evaluation perspective. This has been on the docket for the whole time. But I want to talk about this a little bit. So assignment 1 is going to be due. And normally what I had done is I had made assignment 1 due on the Sunday along with your first playable release, which is the group project. Let me just talk about that briefly before we move on. And that's kind of what I'm doing here in the beginning. So if you notice, I say so last week we had Rui come in. We also talked about, he talked about myth and story and how that's really affected his work and his career and what he does at Ubisoft. And again, thanks for Rui from coming out. I think that was interesting. It lasted a little bit longer than I had planned. I was only planning for half an hour, but it lasted an hour. And thank you for all the questions that everyone had. I think that made it more interactive and more interesting as opposed to just, kind of watching. You were interactive, which is good. It's awesome, especially when you're remote learning. That's an amazing way to learn. Ask the questions and hopefully hear real feedback by someone in the industry. We also talked about keeping the player at the heart of the story. I kind of started off with that lecture last week and a bit about narrative design. What is it? Why is it important in mobile games? And I gave you an assignment in class exercise 1 that was due at the end of last week. So again, most of you were able to submit something, but there were a few of you who did not. This week, what we're doing is I want to start with assignment details. So I want to go into that again and talk about scheduling and dates and all that kind of stuff to make sure everyone's good. We're also going to be talking about designing mobile games and just an intro to how to do that. Some thoughts around designing mobile games, positives and negatives. Some things that you might find yourself doing when you're starting to do that. And then how to monetize, why monetizing is important to mobile, and some industry terms and metrics. These are all things that are course outcomes that I'm also going to be asking you about on the midterm test, which is coming up not next week, but the week after, and I'll talk about that in a little bit as well. We also do a short case study on Magic the Gathering. I'll be talking about that today. And how that's influenced kind of the gaming world as well, especially from an esports perspective. It's up there. Watching Magic the Gathering and looking at that and all that kind of stuff, and actually taking part in tournaments and what that looked like back in the day, as well as how it's evolved now. Okay, so we'll talk about that as well. But first, before we get into any of this stuff, I want to look at assignment details, both for assignment 1, which is your encounter, as well as your first playable release for the group project. Okay, so let's look at that first. And hopefully I'll answer some of your questions. We're also live on YouTube, so for those people who need support from a closed captioning perspective, please click there. So you can get the you can watch it asynchronously as well as what you're doing now. Okay, so let's get into assignments. So if you notice, I posted the assignment details finally, and I have the details right here for part 1, which is create a short D&D encounter. And let's get into that right now. So it looks very similar to what I start off. I say download, the first instruction is download the Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition basic rules. I know most of you have either looked at it, skimmed it, whatever, read it. Some people have done that kind of stuff. And then once you've downloaded the rules, you understand basic combat and the way things go. And again, I think Jonathan mentioned a couple of weeks ago, holy crap, it's 180 pages. Do you have to read every single page? The answer is no. Focus on the basics. There's also some great little videos online on how to play the game. in terms of if you watch some YouTube videos, how do I play, or basic rules of combat and Dungeons and Dragons and so on. And I really want you to focus on character creation because you need to create characters, not now, but in the second assignment, and as well as how to what's an encounter, what are creatures, all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of details in there, and we'll talk about that. So you're going to create your D&D encounter for first level players. So that means that, remember that the scope is, this is kind of a two-parter. The first part, everybody creates their own encounter. That means you and all the people here. And then the second part, which is assignment 2, you get together with your team, your group, and you play Dungeons and Dragons for 4 to 6 hours. That's the rules, and I'll post the details of what I want you to do for that one as well. And then what I want you to do is actually choose one of the encounters, one of the kind of the successful one, the most popular one from the the encounters that have that your group has shared with you. So share the encounters with everybody, and you'll be playing that in the second assignment. But for this assignment, what I want you to do is think about some parts of the encounter that I'm looking for. So I've given you some more details here. I know people are looking at it. I said, just like in the PowerPoint, the first time we talked about this, I want you to create almost like a mini module. Rui actually mentioned this last week when he talked about the mini module. He said, encounters or adventures once upon a time were called modules, right? And really what a module is one part of a larger campaign. Usually that's how it works. And Greyhawk, of course, being the original kind of adventure setting, right? So that was made by Gary Gygax way back in the 70s and all throughout the 80s and 90s and so on until he stopped doing that stuff. And TSR was bought by Wizards of the Coast. He had exited and all that kind of stuff as well. So so a module, right, is kind of like a larger set of stories or a group of encounters. You're going to make one mini module, and what you're going to do is it should somehow link to the greater backstory or campaign of your world. But I mean, again, you're not doing complete world building. I don't expect you to make a complete campaign for this course, for the semester. That's unreasonable and unrealistic. So don't worry about building your entire world. Think of this encounter as a little snippet of your game world, and your encounter should hint at the flavor, and I'm using flavor a lot in this little write-up here, of your game world. And I mean by flavor, I mean just to get elements. It could be the theme, or maybe different themes, the genre, all that kind of stuff that you're going to be focusing on. Again, I recommend keeping it in the fantasy genre and using the basic rules to keep it simple. Some of you who might be more advanced players who already played Dungeons and Dragons may have already, established a larger campaign. If you're one of those people, you're lucky. That means you can draw upon what you already have in terms of producing the encounter. So the encounter should have some components, some kind of appropriate title. What is this thing called? What are you making, right? And I'll show you examples of this. Section 1, and I'm just making sections. You don't have to label your encounter section 1, 2, 3, 4. But one thing you need to know is what the DM needs to know. The DM being the Dungeon Master. Again, Dungeon Master being a term that eventually will change to something else, I'm pretty sure. And this section, like it says, should include important information about the encounter and is an overview of what the encounter is about, right? So the setting and all that kind of stuff. And maybe some important non-player characters, those kind of things. You want to talk about that and how it fits also perhaps in your game world. How does this encounter fit? If it does at all. Or is it something that you can drop into any game world? That's something you can also talk about in what the DM needs to know section. Okay. Section 2, which is encounter hooks. And I'm asking for at least two scenarios where the players can be drawn into the encounter, right? So you want to be able to fit your encounter into a couple of different scenarios. So why are there encounter hooks at all? Because sometimes, just like any quest that you have in a video game, encounters, players may choose not to do that encounter at all, right? They might just say, well, I don't feel like doing it right now. Or you might give them hints that there is a possibility of a really cool encounter, but they may decide not to skip it, or they may not even understand that it's an encounter at all, right? So you create what we call some encounter hooks, and at least 2 of them. And these things really are different scenarios where the players can be drawn into the story, and they should include a location and some non-player characters, because story is character in many ways, right? Characters who are maybe colorful or represent your story, and they should be appropriate, how they fit into the story, the larger story, your larger backstory. Encounter hooks may also include some flavor text that will be used as a guide by the DM and or dialogue from NPCs. What would they say to the players, to draw them in, as an example, or maybe to explain the situation, the problem. They might talk to the players about the problem, and that's what encounter hooks are all about. And the DM may share this or just use it as a guide in terms of what the players see when the DM talks to the players and explains how this all works. Section 3 is the location. Where does this encounter happen? Is it happening, kind of near a keep, a castle, a dungeon, a marketplace? Like, where is it happening, as an example? So that's the location. And again, you want to describe where this is happening. And it should also, the encounter hooks should lead the players to the location of the encounter. So, in some way or another, the encounter hook could be where the location is, or it could be outside of it, as an example. Maybe that you give hints to the player that there's something going on, kind of in the hills, and you see tracks and something that's died, or a creature an attack from a creature or bandits or whatever you're going to do. And then the location may include flavor text again that may be used by the DM to describe the location to the players. Section 4 is the conflict, the actual encounter itself. You will describe the real threat and or conflict here. That is for the DM's eyes only. So things that the DM should know, how to run the encounter. It also includes stat blocks of all creatures involved in the encounter, any tactics that may be that they may employ during combat. Okay, this will give the DM all the information they need to run the encounter, including how the conflict may arise and how the combat may be triggered, if it's going to be triggered. Okay, so that's kind of the conflict. And finally, the resolution. This section will deal with what creatures will do if they defeat the players. What if they beat you? They're going to do they kill you? Is it game over? Or what if they lose the fight? Do they run away? Do they surrender? What kind of rewards does the player get, as an example, as in terms of experience, money, items, information, to kind of carry you to the next particular quest. You also may include flavor text here to describe the resolution. Both types of resolutions, unfortunately you lost or whatever. And sometimes encounters have both of those things. If you lost, you get captured, as an example, and you're in jail. Sometimes, especially first level, DMs don't normally kill players off. They capture them, or they bring them in front of, into another encounter, which is optional. It happens the second, almost like a second phase where they need to escape. Their stuff has been taken. They're low in health, and they need to escape, or before they're presented to, kind of the leaders of whoever is doing what they're doing here. Typically, sometimes they're also killed. I mean, depending on the DM again. And again, you may also include next steps if you plan to use this encounter as an introduction to a much larger world. I don't expect that you will do that, but you can also almost pretend that this is an encounter that belongs in a larger world. And when I mean pretend, is in like act as if, write the encounter as if it does belong in the larger world. So there's an encounter PDF as a guide that you can use. This one here, I've actually included it. And this is the Rakshasa Horror Picture Show encounter that I included here. And notice that it has this really nice little background, and it does kind of capture most of the elements that I've asked you for. So things like the title, what you need to know, the DM, kind of an intro for the DM about what's happening here, why the encounter is here at all. Some encounter hooks. So for example, hook 1, which is homecoming. And what does that look like? Some flavor text you can see that's happening. If they enter the town, you have some flavor text that you can read out to the players, as well as hook number 2, some kind of festival or celebration is another way to bring the players into the encounter itself, as an example. And then more information about how to start the encounter. What are they going to face? So they're facing something called acro rats, were rats. Is kind of the beginning of the encounters and what they're doing. and then some additional characters. And again, it doesn't have to be this long, guys. I'm just showing you an example, all right? And then some stat blocks of what it looks like, how many experience they're worth, the challenge level, and all this kind of stuff, what they can do, okay? Things that are missing from this thing are, you know, as an example, I would put in the resolution, any kind of treasure, that kind of stuff. There's additional things that you could put in here to make it better. So this PDF was actually generated, which is interesting, by another program, and I detailed that program right here. You can actually, you're encouraged to use something similar like homebrewerynaturalcrit.com, which looks like this. It reminds me a lot of latex, actually, and Overleaf. If you ever use Overleaf, you kind of have a couple of things that you're looking at here. So here is, I'll just give you the link right now, you know, for you guys, which is kind of a neat thing. So here it is. And so you go here, you sign up for free, okay? And when you do, you have a chance to either modify what you see here, or so you can edit it, you know, and you can add a bunch of stuff in here. It gives you some, like I said, markdown. Notice that a single, you know, kind of hashtag means like kind of an H1 tag or a major title and so on. And there's a bunch of other stuff that they have in here. Notice that the first hashtag also includes this really cool welcome, W for welcome traveler, and so on. You can include images, you know, as an example, and all kinds of stuff in here to make it as technical and interesting as you want, okay? So really, really cool. That is right here. So let's say I want to make a brand new encounter. How do I do that? I could click new. And then what you can do is you can include, I was just playing around with this for you guys. You can include something like, let's say, for example, I go to the player's handbook and I want to add a spell that someone's going to learn or something that they're going to use. You can have a spell block. It automatically puts it in the right format for you. You can also include things like a monster stat block, where you can replace the monster stat block with something of your own. So really good little formatting. It looks really great. And I recommend this. You can just click on Get PDF when you're logged in. Notice I'm logged in. And then when you get the PDF, it downloads and you can submit it as your encounter. So this is what I recommend. There's other things just like this online, but I find that this one is probably one of the easiest and the best to use, right? Because it's something that I've used in the past. Okay, so this is something like that you can do. So that's one thing. The other thing you can do, and when I mentioned this in the details, you can use, actually our TA recommended this, you know, so I wanted to mention it to you. This is called, it's from Goblinist.com, so tools.goblinist.com. And what you can do with this is you can generate a random encounter for different players. So for example, let's say you want to target level 1 players and you don't know what kind of creatures. You can try this a couple of times. It takes 2 seconds. So you can add 5 players, let's say. Let's suppose I have 5 players or 6 players, right? And you can also reset that if you put too many. It's not a big deal. So there's 5. And then you can choose easy, medium, hard, deadly. You know, what does this look like as an example? And where am I doing the encounter? Let's suppose I'm doing it inside, you know, on the plains. You know, as an example, what kind of encounters could you randomly see on the plains? Let's say the players are on their way to the actual encounter. You might have your encounter may have 2 parts. So a 2-parter. Remember this thing is supposed to last anywhere from 4 to 6 hours, this thing that you're going to be making, right? And you could draw it out. You can decide, you can talk about it. And the reason why it takes 4 to 6 hours is because one part of it is character generation. That takes a long time for them, not this encounter, but I'm talking about for assignment 2. But the other part is actually playing this out and trying this, trying the combat, which is what this is all about. By the way, I've done similar things like this in the past with D&D trials, and sometimes it's lasted a couple of days, right? Because people get into it, right? And that's okay. I'm not looking for you to do. I'm not expecting you guys to do like 2 8-hour sessions or anything like that. 1 4 to 6 hour session with your group for assignment 2 is all that's going to be required, and we'll talk about that in a sec. So let's suppose I choose plains, and then I choose a single type of creature. again, and I want to choose maybe up to 5 different creatures at the same time. As an example, medium challenge rating, I'm going to generate my encounter, and I get, oh, by the way, let me just go back to that. Let me reset that for a second. Important that you click basic rules, okay? Because one challenge that we're going to have with basic rules, because you don't have access, I don't expect that you've bought the player's handbook and the monster manual and the DM's guide or anything like that. I'm assuming that you've downloaded and you're using the basic rules for the encounter. So this is why this little thing is really good. So when you generate your encounter, as an example, let's just refresh. What I'm looking at is 3, 4, 5. Let's make sure it's planes and medium and single and basic and generate. And then you get like 3 giant badgers, and they're each worth 50 experience for a total of 150 experience. It gives you the examples, and it says as per Dungeon Master's basic rules, and you can actually go there. It'll link to the basic rules where you can download them if you haven't done that already. So really kind of cool little generator, and I think it's definitely worth the tryout. Try it out, see if you like it. And it might be able to guide you to see the types of creatures that might make sense from a challenge rating for, let's say 5 levels of level 1. 5 characters of level 1, standing, as opposed to if you went crazy and you said, oh, well, I want to make it for 5 characters of level 5. By the way, I'm hoping that you'll start off with characters at level 1. I think it's a good way of doing it, but I know there's some groups that in the past have said, well, we're starting off at level 5 or whatever. And that's not exactly what I'm asking for, but let's say if you decided to do that and you wanted, let's say, 6 players of level 5 and it's a hard difficulty and you're in the Underdark as an example, which is a very challenging location. And then you're not using the basic rules, you're using the monster manual, and there's a mix of creatures. What can you get? Well, then now you're talking. All right. So where you can get like 1 Koatoa archpriest, a Koatoa, 6 Koatoa, and 3 Koatoa whips, whatever those are. And you can see what the total experience award is going to be for all those things. So really, kind of more challenging encounter compared to what we talked about before. Really cool, and you can check it out. So one of the questions at the beginning is the expected overall time for character creation, exploring the world, facing one encounter 6 hours? Yeah, if you use, I'm saying 4 to 6 hours, if you use some tools to help you build your character. If you're building your character from scratch, pencil and paper, it will take longer. 100%. And I mentioned a couple tools for you that are out there. There are some free tools out there that are built into Roll20. And again, for the details for assignment 2, stand by. I'm going to give you some direction. I'm going to ask you to use Roll20. I'm going to ask you to use Discord or some other chat feature, because I think the Roll20 stuff is not great in terms of being able to talk to each other. But I think Roll20 is the right way to start with everything else. So level 3. Yeah, that level 3 is a little bit too much because then you don't understand what it's like to go through level 1. Level 1 characters, they die a lot easier. They have more challenge, and building, bringing up a character from level 1, as an example, all the way to level 3 or 4 can take several sessions. Okay, we're talking about, especially to level 2, sometimes to get your characters all to level 2, it might take 2 or 3 sessions, as an example. It really depends on the campaign, the types of encounters, how your DM divvies up experience, and so on. There's a lot of different ways for that to happen. And that's why it's good, because you get used to your character. One part of playing Dungeons and Dragons, and if you once you try this, hopefully you'll get a sense of this, is you need to get into character, because it's not Tom that's playing the barbarian. I am the barbarian. I become the barbarian, when I'm playing Carlthud, as an example. I'm not Tom the professor, or Tom, I don't have any other role, and I'm usually laser focused on what I'm doing in the game, and as well enjoying time with my friends, which is part of the social aspects of the game, right? Which is what we're doing. So that's why we're doing this whole thing in the first place. So the first part is make your encounter I've given you some more guidelines on what to do. Again, things that you're encouraged to do are use maps, NPC images if you're an artist, or other kind of artwork as you want for both the DM and the player. So maybe there's going to be some things that you want as the creator of this encounter to show the player. Say this is what the player should see. If you want to draw a concept, or if you want to do some kind of, like, again, very simple artwork or whatever, to show what the players are seeing. You could also capture images that are online if you want to, again, as long as you cite them, to give flavor to what the players would see, as an example. A lot of times, just like Rui said, we use a postcard. We take a look at a postcard as an example, and that postcard starts, and actually, Daryl's going to talk about that. The next, speaker that's coming up next week, he's going to talk about that. He's like, sometimes you'll just take a postcard and right from there and start, building the environment and the world just by looking at a postcard or a picture of a location, and it can inspire him to create the world, right? So maps, images, all that kind of stuff, especially if you're making it a dungeon or some kind of small keep or a tavern or a square, map it out. What do the players see? So when you actually play Roll20, you can draw that out with Roll20 as an example, and I'll talk about how to do that in a bit. And you're also encouraged to use some kind of other kinds of generation tools. There's also generation tools for treasure generators, and those kind of things that can randomly produce treasure and stuff that the people will find at those locations, based on the player's level. So you can find those things online as well. Okay, so things that I want you to do is generate that PDF. Use a PDF, however you do it, whether you make it with Word or use something like Homebrewery, naturalcrit.com. However you do it, at the end, you should have a PDF that you upload for this project, this assignment 1, and attach any citations or references for any artwork or background story elements that you use that are not your own. So if you make a story based on something you really love, let's say as an example, you love that Shadow and Bone, series that was out on Netflix earlier in the summer, and you want to, base your world on Shadow and Bone, as an example, then cite that if that's what you want to do. And there's quite a bit of customization if you were to go that way. But like I said, I want you to think about how you're going to do this. This thing is due Monday, September 27th. So I actually moved it from the Sunday because there's a bit of a clash with everything else that's due to Monday. So I'm going to give you an extra day to put it together. Again, it shouldn't, because you've known about it for so long, in your mind, you should have already been playing at least around with the basics of what I'm looking for, and so on. And I've given you a little bit of a structure and a template to start with, so it shouldn't be as hard as doing it from scratch and not having any structure whatsoever. So hopefully this helps you put things together. Okay, so questions around assignment 1, again, due Monday, September the 27th at midnight, and it's an individual assignment that all of you will be doing, kind of on your own. Anybody have a question at all? And again, you can put it in the chat. I can also look at YouTube if there's somebody on YouTube who wants to put in a comment, so I can answer your questions. And if you don't have any questions, that's okay. Maybe you're going to think about something after. We can deal with it later on as well. I think so too. Jaden says not too many restrictions, lots of creative freedom. I wanted to keep it as vague as I could, but with at least giving you some kind of structure, so that way you know what I'm looking for. All right. In this way, you know how to set things up. And I'm hoping that you'll be able to experience doing a little bit of writing, thinking about narrative, how it fits into your game world. And then what we really also want to do is think about this. If I was going to bring something like this into a video game, how would I do it? Think about the encounter that you're setting up. How would I set up my level in Unity, as an example? Is it possible? Is it something that you'd be interested in doing? How does it translate into a mobile game? Does it translate into a mobile game? It doesn't matter if it doesn't. The idea here is that you're thinking about story, you're thinking about narrative, and you're playing around with understanding role-playing games, kind of from the bottom up, which is a social game. Christian says, so with the encounter hooks, if a player makes a decision that doesn't activate the catalyst for your encounter, is it just a matter of improvising? Yeah, so that's where the procedural storytelling comes into play, right? I mean, you don't want to force the players. You might have more than one encounter in your toolbox, right, for that particular campaign, okay? So, and what I mean by that is, like, you know, you're going to have a larger game world, and you're going to have a bunch of encounters in different locations where the players at first level or second level or third level are going to be able to access. Now, you don't want to stop a player. Remember, we want to talk about player agency. If they really want to find that encounter that's going to fight the dragon at first level, and they want to kill themselves, I mean, go ahead, let them. I don't think that you should discourage them. You should give them warnings. You smell sulfur. You know, this is dangerous. You're afraid. You know, those kind of things. You know, and to say that you're afraid is to a player, especially because that's kind of forcing. You know, you're telling them what they feel. That's not normally what we do. It's a warning. You know, and sometimes DMs just say it. Warning: this is a higher level encounter. Some people just say that kind of stuff. If you're interested in doing it, you go ahead. But this is not what I planned, guys. Wow, you're here already. I didn't expect this. Okay, let's do it. You know, let's see what happens. Andrew says, how long should ours be compared to the Rakshasa Horror Picture Show one? Again, I think similar length would be okay. There's a lot of extra elements in that one. You know, as an example that that may not apply to your encounter. Like if I looked at this one for a second, and let's take a look at this one. This is just an example, right? You know, what you need to know is really all of this, right? From here, really down to here. You know, the person who created this one, the author of this one, you know, they used Welcome to the Circus to really understand, to give you a sense of where Rakshasas came from and all that stuff, why the encounter happened and blah, blah. So a little bit of this would be good. A couple of encounter hooks would probably lead you, you know, to something like this. Notice that this encounter hook also includes a random encounter, you know, as an example, where you can, you know, kind of level 1 to 3, you find a leader with 2 were-rats in human form, and you have a couple of minions, two Kenkus and 1 to 3 gnolls. Holy crap, that's huge, right? And then if you have characters of level 4 to 6, you know, there's more and so on, right? And again, this is assuming that you have a character, 5 characters at least of level 1, okay? If you had less characters, let's say, for example, there's only 2 of you. Let's say some groups, you're non-GW and you combine with somebody else. As an example, there's only 2 of you. And it's a one-on-one, a solo adventure. One person is the DM and the other one soloing. Reduce your complexity, guys. Have it so that there's some flexibility in terms of you know, how you're creating your encounter. So think about your encounter for your group. If you have a larger group that's 6 and 7 you know, team members, you can make your encounter tougher. You can add more stuff. You can make it longer because you're hoping that you can keep your characters or your teammates, your group members entertained again for that time frame for the encounter itself. So again, you can vary the difficulty based on the number of people. And just to continue with that, should it be this long? I mean, it looks long, but really it's in you know, kind of 2-column format as an example. And they go into a lot of detail in the backstory about you know, the acrobats, who are they, and a lot of backstory about what they do, how they move, and all this kind of stuff. And they've given some extra abilities to the acrobats, and in terms of what they can do and how you can use them from a tactics perspective in combat, as well as you know, the Siamese twins, who are they, you know, as an example, and as part of the circus, you know, how this works, the clown car, magical mayhem, you know, and so on, and a bunch of other stuff that they talk about. They also have a lot of the stuff that says, you know, this encounter can be used as a combat experience, or you can have a roper mimic simply grab onto a victim and trap it inside. So there's several different little encounters for this entire encounter. To me, what I'm looking at is make it one encounter, one conflict with some story elements to march the players there instead of doing it exactly like this, right? So keep it easy. Andrew says, okay, we read that already. Ethan is the Kenku gang. Yeah, it's exactly like that. Kenkus are interesting. So, and they're low level, creatures that you can pit against your players. All right. Any other questions around, kind of how to format the encounter? What elements you're looking for and the complexity. Again, if you keep it around this length, this is 3 or 4 pages. Double column with some images and stuff like that as well. I mean, you can certainly add images and stuff to make it interesting. And a lot of this stuff is formatting that you're seeing. And there's also some additional information here, like I said, that you may not need to use. As long as it makes sense for your campaign, you're good to go. And if you don't have a campaign, imagine that you do. All right, any other questions around assignment 1? Assignment 1 is due Monday. Again, Monday. It's not due this Sunday. I've moved it because I know that there's a lot of stuff going on that I'm asking you to do, and I wanted to give you guys a chance to do everything within a timely fashion. Okay, let's go back to the other stuff that I need you to do now. So that's one thing. That's like your individual assignment. But there's another portion of this course, which is this technical aspect and some aligned assignments for your that I'm getting you to do that's in line with you building your GW game. And this is where we're going to have more interesting conversations. All right, so let's talk about this. So let's go to that one. So the other one is a group assignment. So that's project part 1. I talked about this before. A first playable release. Okay, so let me talk about what this is for. So notice I've broken it down into a couple of parts. It looks long, but all I'm doing is providing you details. Okay, so what I've asked you to do is start thinking about your game design document, a first draft of your game design document that I'm looking at. Specifically, when you make your game design document, I want you to think about it for mobile. If you were going to make your game for mobile, what would your screens look like? And I'm going to look at that game design document in a second. You may have seen something like this in the past. You maybe not like this one. You can use another format. But the game design document actually is an outcome, one of the outcomes of this course as well. All right, so that's something that we're going to be looking at, kind of over the next several releases. I don't want you to imagine you're building this game. You're going to build this game. That's why Stephen is there helping you with Unity. If you're someone who can't produce this game because your GW game is not compatible, then what I'd ask you to do, and I know this is tough, is produce a very simple mobile game with some mobile elements that is, again, it would be low fidelity if you're just making it aside from your GW game. If it works with your GW game, you're just going to make a mobile build of your GW game, so that should be okay. But if it's something completely out of whack, let's say, for example, Dr. Hogue has come across with this really cool idea, and you still want to be able to be successful here, what I'm asking you to do is put together some simple assets, and we'll start with that part first. So game requirements. First playable release, you will acquire or create as many graphic and sound assets as required to create at least 25% of your first or main level. So 25%, the rest can be all placeholder. I don't care about them, of course. Your character or camera controller should be working, some kind of movement. If your character controller, you could use the default character controller that comes from the Unity Asset Store if you're building a first-person or third-person game. Okay, so you don't have to make your own. I'm not expecting you to code something here. The code, in fact, for this release is minimal. I don't want you to do a lot of coding or logic. That's what I said. For those people, Andrew, you're going to have to come up with something, another smaller project. I don't want you to be nearly as big as the one that you're doing for Dr. Hogue. I think that's a much different project. So you're going to think about another concept, something that you're going to make, another smaller mobile game that you're going to make in 3D. That's what I'm hoping you'll target. So you can do all the lessons and some of the stuff that Stephen does with you applies to you. Okay, I know this isn't optimal, but I also didn't expect Dr. Hogue to come across and give you a really cool project that you're doing, right? So let's keep it small, keep it tight. I don't expect it to be, crazy scope or anything like that, or an award winner. If you're already doing a game for Dr. Hogue, keep it small, make it one level. Even if it's just a polished one level game, I'm okay. And it's something that should inspire you and the rest of the team. Okay, so that's something that is like, I'm just doing this for Tom. If you're just doing that, then that's not going to be fun for you. I'm hoping that you're going to take some elements out of here because remember, we're going to add multiplayer to this thing later on this semester. with either Photon or Mirror for Unity, right? So we're going to use that. So keep it small, and if that's what you're going to do. And even if you're doing a GDW game and you're like, you know what, I'd rather just keep it small, like Tom says, as if I'm doing the Dr. Hogue project, I'm okay with that too. The idea here is that you're going to make your own little mobile game. The mechanics are your own. Think about the mechanics, dynamics, and aesthetics. I'll talk about that in a second when we look at the GDD. Simple collision detection and basic physics for your game that are built into Unity should be active. So add a rigid body, add some colliders, make it move, first play. All right, it's like that simple. The game world should be arrayed in an appropriate manner. If you can do some level design, that's awesome. If you can do a bit of a background, I don't expect it to be complete in any way. All right, just playable. If you can move it around, and that would engage all of your team members. Things like, hey, there's an opportunity for you to test out a model that you've been designing. Bring that in. If you want to test out, if you're a sound engineer, you want to test out some sounds or dynamic sounds when the player gets to a certain part of the game, bring it in. Make it as simple as possible, though. Okay, please. I don't want this to ruin your weekend or be something that you're going to be cursing me from now until then. It's something that has to be a passion that you want to do. You want to do something that's tied into your GDW game. Awesome. If you want to do something that's not tied into GDW, to be fair with everybody else, that's also okay, right? Just to make sure that it's okay. If we're doing the V Combat game, do we send in a GDD for that or for a smaller game? I recommend for the smaller game. Okay, the V Combat game, doesn't make sense. You know what I'm saying? It may not work for mobile at all, right? And I don't want you guys to waste time trying to do it. It's very uncertain how that's going to work. So I want you to kind of take it down a notch. Even use assets that are from the asset store and make them work. You can use Mixamo for mocap, stuff like that that's already built in. You don't have to make really anything of your own. You can acquire them. I do expect the technical artists in the group. Maybe they'll have a hand in being the lead artist, person who's going to acquire the assets and rig them and whatever and put them into the game. But for the most part, it should be a team effort. Please don't give it to one person to do it. You do Tom's game for Sunday. No. Please don't do that. There's a lot of little pieces here that requires your attention. Okay. On that, let's talk about the GDD and what that looks like. So I've given you a very simple example. I've used this in the past. What you do is you slap in your team logo here. Worst case scenario, it's a first draft. What's your company name? You put that up here. Your title of your document. You can also use this if you want for GDW. It doesn't matter to me. Some people do. You put in the version. This would be version 1 and so on. And then all of your names here, your team members that would be here, and the date that you've made your GDD. Table of contents. I'd like you to put a table of contents in here. And by the way, if you're worried about all the little pieces that are here, this is being recorded. You can always look at the video and fast forward to this piece that I'm looking for. So that way you're not confused about what I'm looking for here at all, right? So a very simple table of contents that points to the other sections that you're going to use. Not all sections in the GDD will apply to you and your game, and I'll talk about that in a second. This is a template. This is not all the requirements. I'm not expecting you to do everything. Version history. For now, all I would like you to do is put in a link to your GitHub repository. That your lead engineer is going to, I'm hoping that they're going to be the GitHub director. They're going to be taking care of this piece altogether. So whoever the lead engineer is, I get them to set up a GitHub repository and put it here. You're also going to submit it later separately, but it should be here in your game design document. And then inside of the body of your design document, anytime you see square brackets like this for the template, remove them. This is just instructions on what to put together for your GDD. And the same thing goes with round brackets like this, so parentheses. Your game overview. What is your game about? As an example, what are your mechanics? How does your game work? As an example. What kind of point of view do you use? These are important pieces that you would probably want to put into any of your games. So if you're going to be a third-person camera or a first-person camera, by the way, first-person shooter, Unity, easiest to do compared to a third-person perspective camera. There's a lot more work to do in Unity with that to make the camera work properly. So if you're making a small game like we're talking about, make it a first-person game. I recommend that. Why? Because it's just less. There's less to do, right? How does that work on mobile? We'll talk about that. There's going to be some kind of on-screen control that allows you to navigate your player a little differently than you would with a game controller, right? But again, from a perspective, part, which one are you going to use? Third person or first person? Recommend first person. Controls. How do you control your game? For now, what I'm looking at is it doesn't have to be a very big control scheme. If you're going to use a gamepad for now for your WebGL build, because that's what you're building out, and you should have learned about how to create a WebGL build. As an example with Stephen, I know that that's part of your ILE2. Then what do your controls look like? Are you going to use a gamepad? Is it the standard control set? You can use images here if that helps you, as opposed to typing it out. Saving and loading, not required. Okay, we're not going to do saving and loading, so you can remove this one. Not required for this one at all. Interface sketch. So interface sketch would be wireframes. So this part 6 would be required. And I'm looking for a very simple sketch, an idea, a concept of what your level would look like. Again, that's why this little project requires your team members to come together. You can probably, get this game design document done in a very short time. It doesn't take, I'm not looking for a lot of details right now because it's concept time here. And you probably have a lot of this already if you're doing not the V Combat game, but something else for GDW. You might already have something like this that you can use. And if you have a GD that's better than mine, use that, right? I'm just giving you a template if you don't have something. Menu and screen descriptions are like screenshots of your game. You can certainly do wireframes. So this is what we planned, and this is what we ended up coming out with for Sunday, are a couple of screenshots. Please don't put a lot in here in terms of like tons of screenshots. It would be nice to have a menu, like a kind of a start screen, a play scene, and an end scene, but you may not know how to do that. What I will do today, and there'll be a small technical section of our lecture today where I will show you how to do those things if you don't know how to do them already, and a very brief part. So it'll be like part 2 of or part 3 of our thing. It's just to supplement what Stephen has shown you already, or will show you in the future. Okay, it's just to help you with some of the stuff, your build for Sunday. Menu and screen descriptions, that's what screenshots are. Game world, you can describe your environment, not detailed. You could include images, concepts, that kind of stuff in here as well. If you have more than one level, you describe them. If you're someone who's going to use this as a small game, quote unquote, what I'd recommend for you is keep it simple. What I mean by this is, only have one level if you're going to be doing the small game. And that's it. So you'll have your start screen, your main screen, and your end screen, and that's it. Nothing else. Otherwise, it's going to be too complex for you to make for this semester. Game progression. How does your character progress? You may want to talk about that, or your game. What is your character? Maybe you want to include an example avatar or sprite that you're going to use. It should be some kind of an image of a model because you're doing, kind of a 3D game here is what I'm looking for. Non-player characters, if there's enemies, what do they look like? You may want to include images if you have them, or even some placeholder assets. This is kind of what we're looking for, all right? But this is what we have right now. Man, again, this is only a first iteration or a first draft of your GDD. It's by no means the last draft. What I expect you guys to do is just to start, formatting or putting together your thoughts, to support what you're doing with GDD. Or your GW as much as possible. Weapons, if any, if they have them, any items that they might have, anything that applies to you. If some of these don't apply for you, remove them. All right. Again, this is just recommendations for something you may want to describe. Vehicles, abilities, some dialogue as an example. How do you score? Are there puzzles or mini games? Hopefully not. That's going to be way out of scope for this course. Bonuses and cheat codes. And what you definitely want to put in is start thinking about a sound index where you include an index or a table of your sound clips, where you got them from, how you made them. Again, it just may be a table with a couple of them right now because you're just starting off with this kind of stuff. You may have a background music that you've acquired or created. or maybe a couple of sounds for being hit, hitting, shooting bullets, that kind of stuff. Very simple. I don't expect, again, to have a lot of details here. Story index, sometimes you may not have this right now, but if you'd like to start outlining your story, you can. It's not required for this one because you may not know exactly what your story is, as you most likely are in flux. Some kind of art or multimedia index, very similar to the sound index, where you have a table and you put in, here's my asset, this is where I got it from. Here's my asset, I made this one, as an example. And any kind of design notes or future features that you're thinking that you probably won't have a chance to do this semester, but you're thinking you might include if you're going to take this further or maybe next semester. Okay, so that's the kind of stuff that you'd want to have. Does it have to be 6 pages? Does it have to have all these things? No, it does not. There's lots of leeway here, and it only has to apply to the game that you're making. Questions around the GDD? Anything at all? All right, so again, template. That's all this is. It's not 100% required. I would prefer you make it your own. Change the color on the background. I'm so sorry, Jonathan. I don't mean to make you stress in whatsoever. I'm just trying to give you some structure on what I'm hoping that you're going to do. It's going to also push you down a specific road. I know people don't like to be pushed a little bit, and I do apologize for that, but we have requirements that some learning outcomes that I need you guys to do. Okay, so that's your GDD. Version control. Whenever you do something, your technical people should put stuff up on GitHub. You guys should know how to do that by now, how to use version control. I recommend downloading a tool like GitKraken. All right, so if you haven't had a chance to use GitKraken, I think it's a good tool. It's a user interface tool, and it works okay with Unity. I think it's a good tool to start to use. You can also use things like SourceTree or something else. Built-in tools for Unity. There is a GitHub tool for Unity. I don't think it's that great. The other option is if you want to use GitHub and Unity Colab. Some of you know how to do that as well. So Unity Collaborate is another way of combining to create something that's really interesting, where you can work in the scenes together as opposed to kind of working separately. And what I mean is it prevents the scenes that you're working on to be atomic. Normally, scenes are atomic. If I work on a scene and I modify them and I put it up on GitHub, you're going to see the whole scene change. But if you're using Unity Colab as an example, then you can work on different elements of the scene, and people can work together, which is really cool. Unity Colab is free if you've got the educational version of Unity for up to 5 people. If you're using the normal version of Unity, there's up to 3 people. And you can also pay for Unity Colab. It's $7 USD a month per person beyond the third person if you don't have, depending on if you've gone beyond the normal limits. Okay, so I use it, and I've shown some people how to use it in the past. I think it's a great tool in combination with Git and GitHub. All right, so if you use, let's say, GitKraken, and you're the lead software engineer, you're the only person that's going to put your commits up on GitHub. And meanwhile, you might have the rest of the team combine or collaborate with Unity Colab. Okay, so that's something that is a way to do that. Again, I'm looking for a very simple GitHub repository with only a few commits, because again, this is just you starting off with your first playable release, right? What we're doing also, guys, I want to point this out as well, is there's a lot of upfront pain that's going to be front loaded for Sunday, but then it's going to pay off because now you're just going to be iterating on that upfront pain for every other release for this course. Okay, so, and hopefully it's going to combine with and work well with engines and some of the other stuff that Professor Alvaro is going to ask you about as well, because there's going to be, he also has links into your project and aligned assignments that are going to be due alongside with mine. So that's what I'm saying. Maybe you can think of ways of combining this so that it's not as stressful. All right, so that is, let's go back to this. So that's version control. Project management, your producer, whoever that is, should be using some kind of project management tool. Again, the suggestion is either Trello, which is the little brother sister of Jira, which is the professional tool, which I recommend for everybody. So if you want to work at a company like Ubisoft, as an example, Ubisoft uses Jira. It is, again, free to try, and it supports for $10 a month. It supports up to 10 team members, and I think there's also a free version now if you want to try it out that actually does it for free. It's a bit of a learning curve, and what it does is it uses task boards in order for you to track your project, as an example. And again, you can use something like this, as complex as this, or as simple as Trello. If you really don't want to use these two tools and you want to use something else, there's also GitHub projects. But what I don't want you to do is use something like Google Drive. That's not acceptable. So please, no Google Drive, no Excel, none of that's acceptable this semester. You need to use a tool. So choose a tool, and that's the tool you're going to be using for this semester. Okay, so again, it's aligned with some of the other things you're getting from Alvaro, Professor Alvaro this semester as well. So going back to that then, that is your project management tool. All I'm looking for is you need to track it in some way. And I'm looking for a couple of screenshots of your product backlog. And for those people who don't know what a product backlog is, there is a really cool video that you can download called Agile in 10 minutes, right? It's, or Scrum in 10 minutes. And I will give you, I can't show this up on live right now, but I'm going to just launch it and then stop it immediately because otherwise I'll get in trouble by YouTube. But this is the link that I recommend. All right, so here it is. Oops, I've sent it to only one person. Let's try sending it to everybody. Sorry about this. And I'll also post this as something that you can use up on Canvas. I recommend it. I think it's a really interesting 2-second look on how to use Agile, what is Agile, and how to use some simple tools. He also uses something called Axosoft, the guy who makes this video. You don't need to use that, and Axosoft's not the de facto standard, it's Jira. Okay, and there's some great tools out there if you're a producer, and that's what you want to do. Jira is for you. You should be learning how to use that. So just to support that, I will put that link on into your module for this release. So this is the project management tool. I need just a snapshot of your product backlog being all the possible features that you and your team could think of right now. You put that in one big list, and then from there, I just want a snapshot of that for this time round. And then you're going to do a little demo video, like I've asked you to in the beginning. You're going to get together with your team, and only one person, only one, needs to make the video that's going to basically demo what you have on Canvas. And you're going to produce it either with YouTube or some other streaming provider. It should take you, it should only be maximum 10 minutes, and there's no editing. I don't want like lower thirds or a professional quality video or anything like that. But I do need to be able to see your screen clearly, and I do need to be able to hear you very clearly. If I can't see the screen, I can't hear you, video is useless. So please make sure that you get that done. And so there's enough people, if you've got like, 5 people on your team, there's enough here, enough meat that you can keep everyone busy with things to do. And again, but although it's fairly straightforward, I don't think it takes a long time to set things up. I think a couple hours, you can put things together, everything in terms of Unity and everything else, especially with the stuff that you've learned right now. Remember, most things, 75% of your assets can be placeholder. I'm just looking for a few assets that you're going to keep for the remainder of the game. And it could be that the 25% of the assets you download are from the asset store, because for me, it doesn't matter. It's something that I want you guys to be able to use as a vehicle to learn how to do mobile, how to have a couple of targets, the first one being WebGL, and the second one is going to be a mobile build target. Okay, so that's what you're doing. So that's your release video. So submission requirements, a PDF of your game design document, a working link to your team's GitHub repo, a working link to your demo video, that's got to be there, and then some kind of screenshots, one or more if you need more, but one is okay, of your current backlog or sprint backlog on your task board in the tool that you've chosen, Jira, Trello, other ones. Okay. This is due Sunday. It's a group project. One person submits, they submit for the entire team. I recommend the producer is the person that submits for everybody, but it's up to you. Questions around this one? If you want to make a private repo, Sam's asking for a private repo. I'm totally fine with that, Samuel. but that means you have to include me as a collaborator. Okay, so that if I'm a collaborator, then I can look at your project. Okay. Do you want the images in a document? Because it looks like the file types don't include images. Oh, thank you for that. Nope. I will make it so that you can include images. I don't mind. And I'd rather thank you that you noticed that, because I'd rather you do that than have some issues. So maybe we'll make it so that it's a PNG or it's also JPEG or JPEG. And I think that's probably good enough. I don't know if you want to use anything else. Do you want to use any other kind of image, like a TIFF or something like that? I don't recommend it. Too big, but something like that is fine. Okay, so hopefully that'll be okay. Okay, so that is the requirements for your first project. It's worth 5% of your final grade. Again, so that one combined with your little encounter is worth 10% of your final grade. That's due Sunday and Monday. So you have a couple things from me for this week. One is your ILE 2, which is due Friday, if I'm not wrong, that Stephen has put together for you. The other one is your group project that's due on Sunday. As an example, and that stuff that's due on Sunday is your the stuff for your GDW. If you're a non-GDW student, again, we have a couple of options. You can combine with another non-GDW student or GDW people. If you want to take on additional help, there are some people who are non-GDW that can just help you build this thing out. I don't mind if you have 7, 8 people on your team. It doesn't matter to me. I want to make this easy as much as possible. And if there's someone who's not in GDW that wants to help you for this course, I'm perfectly fine with you combining and letting them join your team. Okay, so there are some people out there that still don't have teams, and I'm totally fine with them joining, because the first assignment, I removed the other thing for non-GDW because there's only like 2 people that were non-GDW, or 3, and I don't want to make it so that they're combining by themselves. And especially with the encounter and all that stuff, it might be good if you had an extra player, on your team if you have a small team. Okay, so you can certainly do that. So again, this is due Sunday, September 26, 2021 at midnight, 5% of your final grade, group mark. All right, that I'm looking at. Okay, so that is this piece. Also on here, I've just outlined your group role-playing session and report that's going to be due for October 7th. So if we look at the schedule, the way it works, so your encounter is due the 27th, right? And again, I'm looking at you're probably, what I'm asking you to do is probably around the end of the week, next week, so Friday timeframe, where you're going to have a bit of an in-class exercise for me because of the, I'm going to have a guest speaker coming in on the 29th, right? Again, but my recommendation is do something like your session, your 4 to 6 hour session, sometime on or before that weekend. All right, so the weekend of October or 1st to 4th. And then you get your report out to me on the 4th. That's the outline, and I'll give you the report details. Things that you're going to need for assignment 2 for sure. And again, I'm recording this thing so you can hear me and use this thing as what I'm looking at is you're going to do a bit of playing. Part of it is making your characters for assignment 2. All right, so that means, how do I make my character? Everyone's got to go through a session. And the DM, whoever they are, is not going to make their character, because they're the people that are going to run the encounter that you've chosen. So whoever's encounter you've chosen, typically that's going to be the DM. However, I want to also put it like this to you. What if you love being the DM, the controller, think about this, or the narrator, but your encounter, you don't like it as much as, I'm just going to choose a random person here, Ames. Let's say Ames is an awesome encounter guy. He knows how to put together this fantastic encounter, and you want to DM it. Ames doesn't want to do that. He just likes putting or they just like putting the story together, and it's awesome. You love it, and you want Ames' encounter, not yours, and you want to be the DM. That's okay too. All right, so it doesn't have to be the person who creates the encounter, the person who becomes the DM, which is cool. That means you can play your own encounter. Don't worry about the secrets of the encounter or revealing the stuff. It can be kind of an open play where people know what's happening. It's probably for some of you, one of the first times you're playing Dungeons and Dragons. It's okay to reveal what's happening. It's okay to get help from people to how to run things. What the idea here when you're running the encounter is to really get an understanding of the flow of the game. And that's what I'm hoping that you're going to get out of it for for assignment 2. After you play the game, you're going to make your character, you're going to start doing the encounter. The DM is going to narrate and use the encounter as a guide with some procedural generation, because again, you can't think of everything in the encounter. There might be a greater world that he or she wants to bring it, or they want to bring it into. That's okay, right? And then what's going to end up happening is you're going to, at the end of the encounter, I want you to write a little report together as a team. So it's not going to be an individual thing. You get together and sit there and put together a couple of pages on, hey, how'd things go? What kind of players, who made what were the characters? Maybe you want to just include copies of the player characters for me. So show me what you made, right? Show me your character creation, right? I'm going to ask you most likely for a screenshot of your in-play game. So one screenshot of everyone kind of being in play on Roll20. Most likely I'm going to say Roll20 might be the best way to play. If you're using something else like Fantasy Grounds or some other online system, some people like to use Tabletop Simulator in VR. If you want to be one of those type of players, awesome, good luck. I'm looking forward to seeing what that looks like. So people who love VR, maybe if there's a group out there that has a bunch of VR headsets and you want to use Tabletop Simulator to play D&D, awesome. I can't wait to see the output of that. But normally a lot of people use Roll20. It's simple, it's easy to use, and that's what I'm going to recommend in the assignment 2. So you're playing the game, you take a couple screenshots, you're going to report on how did it go? Did the encounter go well? How did the DM do? How did you feel making your character? And then everyone should give a little bit of input about how they felt. Do you think D&D is a good game? Do you think it's broken? Do you think it needs to be fixed? Would you recommend different mechanics? There's going to be a bit of critique around the D&D game system itself, because it's the first time you've played it. You guys are kind of have beginner's eyes, and beginner's eyes, it's kind of a state where you really don't have an influence. I haven't influenced you to say, this is an awesome game. Don't worry about how I feel about it. I want you guys to tell me how you feel about it when you first played. Right. So exactly, no bias. It's just you playing the game and trying to feel how it feels for you and reporting on it. What would you change if you could? Do you think the game rules are good? Are they too complex? Is there too much to do? Or did it flow okay? Have you played other versions of D&D? How do you compare D&D 5 to D&D 4 or D&D 3.5 or whatever? If you're playing other games, or maybe if you're playing other role-playing games right now, even online role-playing games, how does D&D compare to something like that? So these are the kind of questions that I'm going to be asking you to answer in your report, okay? And again, that's really assignment 2. It's just a chance for you to get together and play the game. I think there's a lot of fun you guys can have doing that, and there's some great experiences that you can transfer from actually playing a tabletop game into a video game, which is what I'm hoping that you're going to do. Okay, so that's really a very high level of what assignment 2 is going to look like, and it's scheduled right now for October 4th. That's when it's due, October 4th at midnight. Okay, things not to do. Things not to do. Don't schedule your game session on October 4th. That would be very bad. All right. It's going to be rushed. It's going to be a mess. And you're just not going to have a time to do everything that I want you to do. It's going to be too stressful. Character creation is a game in itself. It's part of the thing that makes you feel, immersed, and it allows you to invest in the game itself. So the character creation process, making your own character, whether it's in D&D or in a game like Dark Souls or Fallout or Skyrim, whatever kind of game, whenever you make that character, even if you just change the way they look or change their voice or add weapons and all that kind of stuff and basically create their loadout, their alignment, you start becoming a little bit more involved or, kind of in the game. And so you have some kind of, it kind of hooks into you a little bit. And so you have so your involvement increases your amount of immersion. We're going to talk about that later on this semester. So that is something that I want you to think about. That takes time, making a character. Also on that, don't worry if your character is not perfect. Okay, I don't want you to think about, min-maxing or any of that kind of stuff. It's not that exercise. The exercise is make a character that you want to play. There's some very complex character options. But if you sit there and I know it's crazy, min-maxing a level 1, but some people do it. Some people do that kind of stuff. Oh, I want this kind of thing. Keep it simple. What if you're someone who already has the rules, or you're a group of people that already have the rules you've bought or acquired? the Player's Handbook, the Dungeon Master's Guide, and the Monster Manual, and other books. It's not just, you haven't just downloaded the basic rules, and you wanted to make your encounter based on a more, kind of that larger world with more supplements and flavor. And I'm just talking about assignment 1. Go ahead. All right, if that's what you want to do, you can. Am I urging you to do it? Hell no. I think there's a lot of work involved. If you've never played D&D before and you want to download the Player's Handbook and look through it and all that kind of stuff, I'm talking buy the Player's Handbook and do it. It's a lot. And it's a lot of investment for a 4 to 6 hour session. If you're planning to play D&D for the rest of the year, and that's how you feel inspired, awesome. Then that's up to you. But please don't distract yourself with this course and use it to say, Tom gave me this crazy thing that I have to do, and you know what, Dr. Hogue, I can't do your course, or you know what, James, I can't do GW, or Alvaro, engines out the window because Tom's getting us to play D&D. They would kill me. Don't do that, and that's not what I'm asking you to do. All right, so so that is the thing that's happening here in terms of our structure. All right, so that is. I know I spent a lot of time talking about it, but I need to. And I spent the last hour and a bit talking about your assignments because I want you to be successful. And I also want to urge you that when it comes to your assignment details, the stuff that I've talked about with you tonight, remember, always for me, it's not necessarily about marks. It's about learnings. All right. For me, that's really where my focus has always been. So, and always will be. So focus on that. Focus on the learnings that the thing that you're gonna takeaways, from this course and that kind of stuff, and use the assignments to learn. Okay, that's what I'm hoping that you're gonna do. All right, so that is the first part. I'm going to stop the video at this point, and I'm gonna go into designing mobile games a little bit more after this. So let's stop the video, and we'll make another one just on the next section. So the first part was all around assignment details. Maybe what I'll do is I'll rename it so it says assignment details instead of